You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Hello and welcome to the Bombad Generals. It's Seth. We're here with Matt. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the middle of my day now, and now you're the one who's at awkward hours. So
6 a.m.
Works out well for me.
Santa's coming to town. Great movie.
Ho, ho,
I don't
ho.
know if you've ever seen the movie Elf.
I have not. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Best Christmas movie out there. Hands down. Anyways,
I'm familiar with the fan theory, though, that links Elf with the Lego movie with Barbie, and that intrigues me.
Ooh.
So, but that's beyond the
Stay tuned
scope
for the
of
Bombad Lore podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not Legion. All right. Well, we'll skip that. We'll talk about Christmas later. But today we got
I was going to say
Oh.
if we're talking about Elf, which faction has the most Christmas spirit in Legion?
the most Christmas spirit. Ooh.
Would it have to be Rebels? Because Life Day and Wookiees and all that?
Oh, probably so. Okay, you and I were going different routes.
Going in very different directions. Okay.
Yes, I would say Rebels then because they have Life Day. Well, there is no Christmas in there, but there is Life Day.
Mm-hmm.
But Republic can run more Wookiees, and Wookiees are the ones that celebrate Life Day.
Correct. But Republic also uses child soldiers. So I don't know if that's quite within the Christmas spirit.
It's like
either.
achieve your dreams for the children, though. So it's like Christmas spirit
They do create employment opportunities for children. Yeah.
for children, which children and elves are like one and the same thing.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
let's hope we're not canceled after this episode.
Gosh.
We're continuing along for our Legion actual discussion. We're continuing along with our series, kind of looking at turn 0 battle cards, and before turn 0 as well, because what cards actually go into your deck you're going to determine before you even show up to the tournament. So what are we looking at today?
So today we got 3 things, 3 different cards, 1 objective, 1 deployment, and 1 condition, and that is key positions, long march, and limited visibility.
Yeah.
Three cards I see often. I see a lot of key positions. I think I see key positions in every deck.
Pretty much everyone has a reason. It's just, especially these days, there's a lot of objectives that don't feel great necessarily. Key positions is one of those ones that trooper decks can take, gun lines can take, mobile lists can take with vehicles. Everyone's got a reason.
Yeah. So we'll talk about these 3 now. Just telling everyone here now, these 3 are not connected in any way. So we're talking about each one. Like, it's not them as a whole. We're just going to talk each one individually.
If you're running Long March, you probably don't want Lim Viz. Those they don't really go well together.
I would also say you don't want key positions. Let's talk about Long March since we're already
start with Long March. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
Start there. So Long March, you deploy on the short ends of the board, range 3 in. Pros and cons.
So that leaves.
Why would you?
You both are range 3 up. If you're on the tippy top, you're basically range 6 from one another because it's range 3 from the edge. Then you have a range 3 again to the middle of the board, and then that's mirrored for both players. So range 6. So even if you both move forwards, you won't be able to move and shoot at range 4. So it's pretty far apart.
Yeah, it is. Which is great for snipers. It's great for anything long range, pretty much.
Gun lines usually like it a lot because gun lines operate a lot on range control and leveraging range advantages. And if you think of the opposite of a gun line, you've got vehicle lists, maybe looking to flank with speeders. The board narrows quite a bit. It's kind of creating a choke point because the whole battlefield is only range 6 wide, and terrain and whatnot, you're creating narrower choke points, hard to get around and flank with speeders. And obviously melee or aggressive skews, like something like an Ewok or Wookiee skew, they don't want to cross all that no man's land to engage and start hitting you at range 2 and closer. So gun lines are generally, I'd say, the main culprit for wanting to run Long March.
Gun lines, and I would say vehicles as well, specifically like ATSTs.
Yeah, big tanks, big kind of tanks,
big
vehicle
boys.
lists.
Those because normally with ATSTs you can move and get a shot off at range 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot like the movement millimeters for ATSTs, but
It's big.
It's big, but what I see a lot is like ATSTs, you just put both of them in the middle right next to each other, and they pretty much for their arcs, their firing arcs, like they have the whole board pretty much.
Yeah, and if you want to run like a double AAT list in droids where you have like 2 AATs decked out and a bunch of chaff, because of the narrower board, it's a lot easier to hide your army behind those AATs. If you're on something like battle lines, it's going to be easier for someone to get into the flanks. Or, saber tank, it's going to be easier for someone to get into that side and start picking up impact. You don't want, for example, rebel snipers or imperial snipers just shooting into the side of a saber tank with high velocity and impact 1 and pierce. They're not really going to get a chance to do that on Long March.
Yeah, not really at all. So Matt, what are some pros? We'll talk about the pros of bringing Long March and like when you want to bring it and then when you don't want to bring it.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the pros.
Yeah, so I think when you want to bring it, we've kind of touched on already, just as far as like list and stuff. But I think for me, maybe this is jumping ahead. When you want to play it is also a very interesting discussion, because we talked about how far apart things are, when you start range 6 apart on Long March. And that's very true. It's the objective where you can generally, if you're trying to be as close as possible, you're going to be as far. It's the furthest objective.
Yeah.
Something like advanced positions, you can start really far apart, but you can also start pretty close if you want, if you deploy in that little panhandle. But that's all to say, don't think that just because you start far apart, that it means the objectives are also going to be as far apart as possible, right? Because the way the objective is shaped is just a straight line at range 3, then it's going to force all those objectives to beyond range 4 of each player's board edge, versus something like major offensive or advanced positions. Your armies can start closer, but you can hide your objectives farther away. So if you're playing something like recover the supplies or VAPs, then you can hide your VAPs better on other objectives, versus Long March, they're going to be a little bit more exposed. So this actually came up back in Adepticon. It would have been 2022 Adepticon when I was playing Kyle Dornbos in that event. He was running an Anakin Padme clone ball, and I was running Luke DLTs, so like 2 gunline lists, and I was red player back when red player lost on VAP ties. And the way it was shaping up, the best option was to go with VAPs, but to force Long March, which actually made it a much more interesting game. And he had to expose a unit to tap a VAP, which allowed me as red player to pick off an activation and win on points. But if we had left it with something like, as I say, advanced positions, major offensive, then he can hide them away. I have a much hard time cracking through. So whether you are, that's probably more for red player. If you are forced to be playing something that maybe you don't want to play, or you have last ban, that's how I would control it. Now, it's a little bit different nowadays, because if you are red player, it's quite possible that you win ties. So maybe you do want to go with one of the other deployments so that you can pull the objectives back as far as possible.
That's fair. Yeah, I remember actually a game we played at the World Qualifier of GSG, where we played Recover the Supplies with Long March. And Long March, I think, was actually more beneficial for you than me, because you won. I believe, yeah, you won tie. No, it was I won ties as a red player, but I was so objective skewed that I needed to get to the middle. Like, you had range on me, and I needed to get to the middle a lot quicker than you did with my like Yoda Chewie. And you were just able just to hold that line with your gun line and be like, if you come in here, I'm going to kill you. And so that was actually a lot harder for me because there wasn't as much maneuverability that I had.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one on VAPS. That's a good distinction because I'm talking about more the two objectives that you choose to place. In that game, the important one with recover is the middle. In our matchup. It was all about who got the middle. And because it's a long deployment, that is the deployment where I'm forcing you to as far away as possible from the middle. It's going to take the longest to get there. So yeah, you can't do your Yoda Chewie shenanigans of scout up and then with Chewie and then backpack and then move and claim. I didn't want any of that crap.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. It's, do you want to protect your home objectives versus do you want to make it harder / easier, depending on whether you want to play Long March or not, to get to that middle objective?
Yeah. Just some things to think about when putting Long March in your deck / do you want to play Long March? I think if you're an aggro list and your red player in Long March is coming up, you probably don't want that. Unless it's something like recover where it's like, okay, I can hold like range 2 to the middle, and then if they come to get it, because again the blue player has to force the objective in order to win, then you can go and like hold that line. It's all strategy that you can think about, whether it's like depending on the objective, do you want to bring Long March or not, and like I could be aggro or not.
I could see a case where a really aggro list, it's harder now in a way with the scale changes.
Yeah.
But say, you've got some Wookiees and you don't want them to get shot until they engage, really, right? Until they're very close to engagement. You want them to get shot once so you get tenacity, but that's it. And the good thing about Long March is that you get a turn or two to really position before the shots start getting fired, which means if you do have, the last event I was at, there was a lot of really big terrain pieces near the middle. Too big, I would say, in many circumstances, but with tables like that, Long March, you could have enough time that even if your deployment's kind of open, you can double move, get behind stuff, and just advance behind cover. So even though it's long, you're not really gonna, they're not gonna be able to pick away at you at range 4 and 3 because you have that time to get in cover before that happens. Versus on a shorter deployment, yes, you can get there sooner, but they might be able to start attacking you before you can hide out of LOS or hide in cover.
Yep.
So if you need time to get set and get get in position, Long March can be good for that.
Cool. So those are like when you want to take it. Now let's talk about when you don't want to take it. If you see in the battle deck or if you don't want to play it. What are some reasons?
If you want things to happen fast and if you want to get on flanks, if you've got, we've talked about aggro, we've talked about flanking speeders, but something more like R2, any kind of secret mission, probably not going to have a great time with it because it's going to be really, really hard to score for R2, especially like speed 1 moves. He's basically double moving the whole game, and it's very constricted. So a unit doesn't have to go too far out of their way to intercept and nuke that unit. Versus on a wider board, they might have to really go out of their way to do that. So that's one big one, I would say, on when you really don't want to play it.
For R2, yeah. I would also say like for speeders, because speeders, if anytime I see Long March, I'm like, I don't want that if I'm running Barks. Because my Barks, especially with the cover changes, you really want those flanks and you really want to get those open cover shots. And it's very close to impossible to get out of cover shots when it is Long March. And then also, with like Long March, like it's so narrow that like your speeders aren't really like doing their own thing. It's both. If like you're facing like a gun line, it's like your gun line can easily get to the speeders to where like
it's easier for them to corner them too.
Yeah,
it's not only harder for them to get in and get those shots, but it's hard. They don't really have the space to bounce away. Kind of like that discussion we had last episode on Breakthrough, where you want to be more central so that you can give yourself space to bounce to the outside.
Yep.
That space doesn't exist. The whole point that we were talking about Breakthrough is to either try to make the table narrow if you were not the speeder player, or make the table as wide as possible. Long March just forces the table to be narrow. I would also almost say Bounty can get, as someone who's played a decent amount of Bounty Hunters, I would say Bounty is actually a bit harder on something like Long March, just because, again, since it's harder to get those cheeky flanks, it's easier for someone to hop behind LOS blocking, and, well, I can't really get to them without going through the whole army and getting my Bounty Hunter killed. Versus on other deployments, you might be able to sneak around, peek them, and launch a boba rocket or something.
That's fair. Yeah. I personally just hate Long March, just in general.
I love it. That's our play styles. Long March fits great for most of the lists that I love. I like Jedi who need time to maneuver around and get in cover and out of LOS, and I like gun lines, so it's perfect for me.
And I just like the maneuverability that I don't really get on Long March. And I feel like Long March is just like a slower game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's just how the deployment is. So
it's slower, but kind of faster in a sense too, because turn one is just positioning. You can often go through that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, if dice are flying turn one, it's going to take a lot longer. So do you like Lim Viz then? Is that more in your wheelhouse?
Yes, I do like Lim Viz. I like it a lot. Unless I'm playing Dark Troopers.
Yes, that's the thing. I was actually thinking, now with the Dark Troopers kind of on the way out, or are they? Because I don't know, I don't think we talked about it. Yeah, it was just a message I sent you. We didn't talk about it on the last pod. I'm kind of thinking about Dark Troopers again. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but a lot of these Yoda skews, I was running 2 RPS. I think I wouldn't have too bad a time versus Dark Troopers, but a lot are only running like 1 RPS. And then, maybe you've got a mortar for critical 1, and then everyone's got Echo. So you got a little bit, but not a lot.
For Republic specifically, yeah.
For Republic specifically, like if as a counter meta option, Dark Troopers could maybe make a comeback. I don't know. But they're generally on the downslope now.
Yeah.
Back when Dark Troopers were a thing, you really didn't want to have Lim Viz.
Nope.
And we'll get to eventually rapid reinforcements, which was even more extreme. So I feel it's kind of safe to take Lim Viz again. Are you taking it?
Yeah, for my Yoda objective skew list, yes, I am taking limited viz. Because this is why I like to put limited viz. I'm not really running a gun line. And sometimes in situations like recover the supplies, I want to do like some tricky stuff where it's like Yoda and Chewie can do some things, and limited viz just guarantees that they're not really going to get shot from like a full-on gun line. And it just opens me up to have those turn 1 plays where I have a little bit of flexibility, and I'm not really I have the reward without the risk. Now, if the whole gun line like deploys range 2, that's a different story. But then there's more strategy than like, okay, you're a lot closer now to Yoda or to my Force user, to where instead of going for the objective, then I just attack you because you're right there and I'm in your lines already. So
it's actually good. It combos well with what we were just talking about on Long March, because with Lim Viz, you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You could get a close deployment, but still have that turn 1 of setup where you can move around without getting shot. Because I think most experienced players will know this, but for anyone newer, like turn 1 Lim Viz, don't plan on shooting anyone. It's not like a, hey, I'll get to range 2 and blow them up, because standbys exist. So if there's any threat, people will just take a bajillion standbys. And you don't want to walk into those standbys, because the people could just move out of range and now you're overextended, or they could just get the first hit off on you, because you can't knock off the standby if you can't get to range. If you have to get to range 2 to shoot them, you're not going to knock off the standby.
Yeah.
Except for like a very weird case where you could get into range 2 mind trick from out of LOS, but like no one runs mind trick, so it doesn't matter. It's bad.
Speak for yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
Even new suppression rules with Yoda double tapping mind trick on the last turn, like, it's not good even in that circumstance.
Yeah, no, you have to like mind trick. It'd be like Yoda's 2-pip where like you double force blast and then mind trick. and it's like that's such.
I think maybe,
situation.
Back when shared standbys were a thing, maybe, but nowadays, right? Like the scariest standby situation, Yoda can just do in one turn. Guidance and standby, force push you out, boom, fire supported shot with a standby. Like it's you can't mind trick your way out of that. But that's a sidetrack.
Anyways,
just trashing on mind trick. But yeah, it's really think of Limviz as that turn to that first turn where you can get in position. And turn 2 still, like range 3, gunlines can operate, but they're not getting that plinky range 4, get some attrition before we move into range 3 and really start walloping.
And that's a keyword that I was thinking about is attrition, is those gun lines, especially like those arcs, snipers, range 4 criticals, like they want to start attrition turn 1, and limited viz cancels that. Even like not just round 1, but kind of round 2 a little bit, because you don't have that range 4 poke at all. And like it just nullifies your snipers. So taking out my opponent's snipers, if they're running 3 snipers, that's 120 points right there. Over that, or
like Aiden or Bosk, those guys, they don't want to get to range 3 for sure.
Yeah,
and even a gun line that has range 4 elements. Like I know DLT spam isn't really a thing anymore, but that sort of list that has range 4 poke, even when things close to range 3, you never really have all 5 units firing at range 3. It's a couple units doing range 3, cycling up, and then a few cycling back, plinking range 4. So you're really taking a lot of stuff away, even with just range 3, because it's not like their whole army is going to get to shoot. And if they do, then their whole army, again, is closer to you. You can charge in, and probably by turn 3, you're swinging your swords or what have you.
Yeah. I really like limited viz because it more affects, like it hurts my opponents a lot more than it affects me. From the list I like to run, how I like to operate, I see limited viz not as something that like if someone sees it like on slot 1 or 2, it's like, oh, I have to cancel that out. So that's like a cancel out already that I have. When we were talking about flipping for the battle deck, so that's why I like to bring it a lot, is because people cancel it out, and I'm like, oh, there's a free battle deck.
Yeah,
and if it's like there for the taking, I'm probably going to take it.
Conditions are probably the least important, quote unquote, like of the 3 types of cards. Usually your priority should be getting a really good deployment and objective, and then the condition is, there's a lot of conditions out there that both players can kind of just shrug their shoulders and say, whatever, that's fine. Like it will favor you or me a bit more, but it's not a deal breaker. But Lim Viz 100% is something that, as you say, will force a lot of opponents to say, no, I can't have that happen, and use one of their 2 burns on it, which means you get to decide the more important ones better, because you have two bans to their 1 in that scenario.
So I like bringing it for that sake.
Yeah. Well, 2, I guess the other thing, right, is if you can have, oftentimes we look at objectives, if there's that 2-3 slot, or that 3-4 slot, like there's a couple ways it can fall where your opponent can force two objectives. So like if they're, or I guess depending who's blue and red in this scenario, it might be more like, hey, I have like breakthrough bombing run or hostage bombing run in the first 2 slots. They're going to want to spend their first 2 turns banning those. So great, I'm going to be able to just ban 1 condition, and I get Lim Viz. So I don't get my favorite objectives, but I get to have Lim Viz because they're busy banning those objectives. So it's really nice when you can get strong cards in the condition slot, which again was one of the great things about Dark Troopers, because they could take Lim Viz and Rapid and just feel great about their and have a really terrifying condition slot.
Yeah, not a lot of condition affected them.
No,
unfortunately, but
yeah, war weary, hostile. Yeah, who cares?
Who cares?
Like, but war weary and hostile, I think, are both mainly in that category of like, it's an inconvenience, but if that's what I'm forced to play with, whatever.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. When we get there, we'll
get there. So, you hate limited viz with your objective. Oh wait, okay, hold on. Actually, for your ARC Trooper lists, Do you hate limited it is?
I would not, because I like the flex of that list, right? I think part of what makes Yoda arcs very, very strong is that it can work well at range or when it has to press the W key and go all in. For me especially, right? I'm running Clone Commander with 2 RPSs, so I have lots of fire support potential at range 4. And obviously there's 3 sniper rifles. So if you're fire supporting an arc sniper plus RPS at range 4, in certain matchups, I'm feeling great about that. If I'm against like an aggro list, I do not mind doing that for a few turns while they close, and then I turn up. I'm not going to proactively close range on those lists. So I think it's flexible like that, which is why taking that option away from them, because if you're running this, you're going to have a list that wants to get close.
Yeah. And
taking that option away, they're not going to love it. It might not be the worst thing. They might live with it, but it's not ideal for sure.
Yeah. So that's limited vis.
It's collecting dust in my binder right now.
It's not. Yeah. I have it actively in my card holder, ready to go. Great. So last, but certainly not least, we're moving on to the objective is key positions. 3 objective points, all a terrain piece, not a barricade to be exact, because you can no longer put it on a barricade, even if the barricade was pre-existing there. Anyways, that are there. Why would people bring key positions? Or I guess, okay, everyone brings key positions. I think it's a super easy objective to understand, but like, what would make your list or your playstyle more favorable for key positions?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the gun line side, and I can talk about body swarm side too, and maybe you can talk more about your sorts of lists. We can kind of talk about why it's something we can agree we both take. Yeah. I think from the gun line side, key positions is an objective that doesn't score until the end of the game, which hopefully is turn 6. You want that to be turn 6 to get full game in, but that means that you can just sit back and just plinky, 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 and not really worry about the moving towards the objective until the late game. So you can just sit, leverage that range advantage, and not get penalized for it because there's no scoring until very late in the game. That's kind of a big reason I think why gunline lists like it. And it's the kind of objective too where the enemy will have to come to the middle at some point, and if you can have a gun line that your enemy has to walk into to get to the objective, you're feeling great, right? So you're shooting at long range, and then eventually that range is going to close on turns 4, 5, 6, and hopefully you have enough firepower, enough attrition already, you just go and finish the job. That's why I like it as a gunline list. As a body swarm list, so if you're talking like 14-act Ewoks, then
I would even say like an 11-act droid list is body.
Or 11-act droids does this as well. It's the kind of objective that you can just swarm with bodies at the end of the game. You can just hide, swarm with bodies versus something like intercept where you can kind of do the same thing, but then you have to win on kill points and stuff, or you have to go earlier and then you can get shot. You can hide the whole game and then just pile drive at the end. As you said, droids do this great too because they just have so many of them and the perfect order control. And yeah, suppression is kind of the downside to it for gun lines. If you have a lot of like Courage 1 units, because movements and actions are so important at the end of the game, because you don't generally want to be sitting on that middle objective the whole game. Usually, like last turn, you want to have a move. Sometimes you need a double move. And a suppression means you can't double move or you can't move and attack.
Yeah.
If you're Courage 1.
Yeah, I played a lot of key position games to where like it all depended on if this unit like cleared their suppression or not.
Oh, and force users love key positions because it's an objective where they can just go last, force push someone off and say you're not scoring.
You're not scoring.
You can't force push a wound off of a VAP.
Yeah. And that's why Yoda's so good, because Yoda can take a guidance, kind of. Anyways,
You can double guidance onto. It's not the same though. Like
not the same,
Yoda can just walk onto key positions at the end and force push 2 guys off,
yes.
and potentially swing his lightsaber too. Again, like if everyone's coming to a close spot, that means the Jedi can start chopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the laundry list of reasons why it can work well for a gun line.
Yeah. And if you're a new player to this game, I would highly encourage you to not, Matt kind of touched on it a little bit, but like I've seen a lot of players that they just like dive into the key position like turn 2, turn 3 to where like, okay, I have this, now I just got to control that. Most of the time that's not going to help, and it's more of like you want to kind of slow play the game. Some people hate slowing play the game, which I get it, but I think the greater, stronger advantage for this objective is slow playing it and like doing a lot of that range control, doing a lot of poke. I think we've talked previously in the podcast about how VAPS is kind of like the highest competitive like game that you can play because it's like there's a lot of strategy and poke and range control, and I think key positions is probably the next one there. There's just some other factors that come into it as well. So
you can get some very like as far as like technical Legion stuff. Key positions is definitely one that you can get some very technical play at the end of games, because if it's devolving into like melees and snapping rules and all of that, it gets very in the weeds and the nitty gritty.
Yeah. There's a lot of snapping. I've made a lot of mistakes, key position snapping. So, it's pretty technical. So, anyways, so actually, you said, why do I bring it? I actually do not bring it in my list.
That's fair. You've got better options
because it is so favorable for almost everyone. Like almost everyone can play key positions and do decent at it. Where some lists are like not as strong on certain objectives where I'm stronger. Anyways, I think if we're talking about other lists that are really good, we talk like some droid lists, like AATs love key positions, in my opinion, because sometimes you get stuck on a terrain piece in the middle to where it's just like like a box, like it's such a small key position.
It's like a crater or whatever, or just like a small piece of area terrain,
and your whole like tank vehicle can just sit on top of it and be like, no one else can be on top of this except me. So that's where like it kind of forces your opponent to like have to kill your vehicle, or else you're just gonna score everything. Of course, that's like in the sense of that, like a specific terrain, I think is very helpful for vehicles. And like I've played a double bus key position, so I'm like, I have to kill these buses. like in order.
Buses are killable at least. Double AAT, like if they don't want you to kill both AATs, you will not kill both AATs. They will have at least one, quite possibly 2 left for the end of the game that just go and walk on that middle objective. And the important thing, if you're going with that strategy, is you can't, especially against force users, you have to be very careful about sending actual troops up there, because if your opponent can create a melee, engaged troopers can't be displaced. So if there are engaged troopers on that KP, you can't sit your tank there because you can't displace them. Correct. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by like, oh, whatever, I'll throw this B1 unit in there and they'll take their time, and it's like, oh no, shoot, they just force push them and create a melee, and now my whole strategy's gone.
It's kind of like the last turn you want to move your tank on there, the first activation that you do.
Well, you can do it the last activation so it doesn't get shot, because if it's 10 opponent units, they're not in melee with themselves, and you just displace all of them.
That's fair.
Now they might be standing by, but then you can spend the whole turn kind of shooting the standbys off. Yeah. Similar concept, and I think a reason why I agree. Yeah, in an objective skew list like yours, with Yoda Barks, you don't really want it because it can kind of work for everyone, and the whole point of the list is to like have very favorable objectives. But if you got forced into key positions, it's not terrible, because there's Yoda, but also on the same principle as the covering the whole objective, the home objective, the objective that the player gets to choose, that's somewhere where there's almost certainly not going to be a melee. And if that's a small one, sometimes, like I was playing the game, I kind of had to choose a few crates as my home objective because it's just the only thing that really worked given the deployment and where the train came out. You can just take a bark and just go sit on it at the end of the game. There's almost certainly not going to be a melee, so you don't have to worry about that. If you can cover the whole objective, awesome. It's going to come up a little less frequently because that is a player decision. But you can certainly, as I say, there are times where it's just going to kind of have to be that. Those units are easier to hedge out with standbys, but more things that your opponent has to account for is always good versus they can dedicate all their resources to the middle objective.
And that's why I think it's like for key positions. So like if I'm playing that, actually a lot of my strategy is, okay, how can I like attack their home base?
Yes.
Like, and not necessarily like, of course, defend the middle, but like, I want to be guaranteed because it's not always guaranteed. If you just go for the middle, you're going to get it. So it's like, how do I bring other factors or like take pressure off the middle is like you attack their home base. And that's why I think it's like so important that like there's a lot like I try really hard just to not like I love rolling dice, but like I try really hard not to just like go in like, oh, I'm going to attack and I'm going to just kill and roll dice. But like key positions like, oh no, I want my activations to stay alive until the last turn because really it's not a turn 1 or 2 game, it's a turn 6 game, like and so I need to make sure that I'm playing all the way to the end. And so that's where like I'm playing a lot more conservatively. My bikes probably aren't even engaging honestly until like turn 5 they're setting up, and then turn 6 they're moving in. You know, you
don't want to be at a big activation disadvantage on that last turn. If your opponent can go last with like 3 units, that's really hard to come back from. Because not only do they
force user.
Yeah. Well, and any unit can score. That's the thing. So any unit can score a KP, which means any activation advantage they have is not only units moving last, it's units, they have more units, period, that can't score.
Yes. Yeah.
I like what you're saying about attacking the home objective because I think that is an important part of playing VAPs. And to kind of go along with that, how far apart? So you got your middle objective. Yes. How far apart are we putting that, your home objective? Are you putting it as far back in the corner as you can, or are you putting it closer?
So I preferably like to do it a little closer. I'm probably about like range 1.5 away. It, of course, depends on the terrain because I think for 2 reasons. If I get some unlucky dice rolls and and I'm down to 1 unit, they can just like move back and now they're scoring for me no matter what. And also I think it also because I'm so close, like the middle objective and like my home objective is close, I can protect both of them equally. Yeah, so it's like exactly if bikes come in and to try to attack, it's like, okay, I have my whole army and I'm not just having like 1 unit, like my throwaway unit just trying to protect them. So I think that's a big thing is like I think for key position, you don't want a big dispersion of your units out around the board. You kind of want them more clumped together to like, okay, like you're kind of more on a defense mode and less of an offense mode. And so having them a little closer together is like I have a more solid defense.
I think starting out, it feels safer to have it away in a corner.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's not as safe because your units aren't there. Your units are going towards the middle usually, and a lot of lists want to stay together. So if you're going to have most of your army by the middle anyways, have your other objective near to the middle so that I have 10 units here. It's not all going to just go to the middle. I can go 5 and 5 if someone's, threatens my back objective. I can go 3 and 7. I can divvy them up however I want. Because again, actions become so important. If it's too far away, you just might not have enough actions, or you might get really messed up with a suppression. If they're kind of in that range 1.5 zone, if you're in the middle, even a 1 action courage 1 unit with a suppression can single move either way. Unless there's snow, and that's why I see some people sometimes take naked snows instead of naked storms. KP is an example of why you kind of want storms in that situation. I mean, being able to move and dish a suppression isn't bad with a double move, but you just generally want a bit more speed. You want to cover a bit more ground. But But yeah, I'm very much in the camp as well of like have a closer, put my home objective closer. Now, does that mean maybe it's a little more vulnerable to attack? Potentially, but you want to make sure that they have to go through your army to get there.
Yeah. It's really hard to attack an objective that there's 800 points like defending it. So, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but like having like, oh, how do we phrase this? It's like engaging your like with your whole army at the same time, and not necessarily engaging like with 1 unit or 2 units at a time, but you kind of want, if someone comes into your lines, you want your whole army to be able to hit it and not just 1 or 2 units. And that's where like, if you have your objectives closer, that's very possible. And it's very hard because like if I'm sending a bark in, I'm sending it into 5 activations that'll potentially shoot it and kill it. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're gonna die, you know?
Yep.
So there's no point in bringing it. Like that's where I just use the barks to just go into the middle. Like, okay, I just need more bodies in the middle.
Yep.
Yep.
Which they're great at.
That's why I love barks, is because they're so flexible. I can either attack.
They are very flexible.
Go in the middle. So yeah.
I can't blame you.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it I have for KP.
Yeah.
Any additional things?
So what would you do for like a melee skew list? So is it more just like just go for the middle, or you're going for the middle and then you're just gonna power through and then like?
It's tough. Yeah, depends. Like when I think about aggro lists, I guess part of my mind still thinks about like one of the old great ones, which was original Tawns, and the way those lists kind of operated was like, we're gonna smash your lines so quickly and take up your time so that you just can't get to doing objectives fast enough, right? Because like the Tawns will die eventually, but the idea is by the time you kill them, there's not enough time left in the game for you to accomplish all the objectives. And I'm not sure how well that works into something like key positions, because if I turn 5, I've finished all these Wookiees that are in my. I'm finishing off the Wookiees that are in my face, and I have 2 guys left in the squad. They can just walk onto the middle. There's still time to walk onto the middle objective, right? So, I haven't played enough of it honestly in recent times to be sure, but it probably wouldn't be my first option. Again, it depends on matchup.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm a melee skew going into a gun line, I am not really. I want the gun line to have to come towards me before turn 6. I don't want to be just going into them before then.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Just wanted to see if you had any thoughts.
Yeah. Do you agree generally with those thoughts?
No, I agree. Yeah. I agree. I think because like dice, because like if I'm doing like Wookiees and I'm like running them in, there's like it's never like you want to take out units. Like activations, and it's never a guarantee when it comes to dice. So, yeah, if your whole goal is just to take out units, I don't think that's like a great strategy.
Those sorts of lists are not lists that actually generally win on kill points or end up with activation advantages.
Yes.
Both of which are handy, because again, if you're up on kill points, then you don't have to win the center objective. You just have to tie it. Yeah. Which helps as well. And then obviously, if you have secret mission, it's a big equalizer too. Because if you can just put R2 around the outside, then score your home objective, score secret mission, 2-2, it's coming down to kill points. So that can kind of flip that objective specifically as well.
Yeah, secret missions and even bounty as well. Like
bounty, same thing for sure.
And that's the great thing is that like for a bounty or secret missions, that like it's very like it makes a big impact on a game like key positions.
Well, the great thing about bounty is if you bountied something, it means you did kill it, so you have some kill points in the bank as well. If it goes to 2-2.
Yeah. And normally that thing is 90 plus points. Around there, unless it's like an officer, so we'll just say like 50 plus.
Yeah,
which is
exactly
in the game now. Sweet.
Officers
all
are
my
good,
thoughts.
generic officers. Yeah, that's all mine. I think there was a good lineup of 3. Again, probably don't run all those 3 together.
No.
But hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do, I guess.
If you do, good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, you'll need it.
And stay Gungan.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.